Hey there, Guitar Geeks. Guitar Guts here with a few thoughts on pickup exchanges in Les Paul and SG guitars. Les Pauls and SGs have sort of been the mainstay of Gibson's line for many, many years. The SG came about during a few years when Gibson made the pretty stupid mistake of ceasing production of the Les Paul. And they're very different guitars, even though the hardware is really similar on both of them. The controls are really similar on both of them. The bodies give them a very different sound and a very different vibe when you're playing them. The Les Paul has a really thick mahogany body with a maple cap on top of that, which makes it even thicker. And it's a short, sort of stubby little body with a single cutaway, whereas the SG has a thinner mahogany body with no maple cap on top, a much wider, thinner piece of wood, and it has a very different tone to it. Such a different tone, it seems to me, that the pickups that work well in Les Pauls are not always necessarily the same pickups that work well in SG guitars. And I know that Gibson sometimes ships SG and Les Paul models with exactly the same pickups in it, but I don't think that's always the best idea. When it comes to my choices in pickups, I like to try to balance the natural tone of the guitar with the pickup itself. You can have too much of a good thing. For instance, in Les Paul guitars, Les Pauls tend to have a really, really firm, fat bass end to them and really clear, bright, ringing treble tones. But they lack a little bit in the mids. Not to say that they don't have any mids, or they can't if you put the right pickups in them, but acoustically, just naturally, I think the Les Paul tends to lack a little bit of mids and have a stronger bass and treble frequency than it does mids. The SG, on the other hand, lacks a little bit of mids, and the highs can be a little more rounded and subdued than the Les Paul. But the SG does have a very chewy, full mid-range. So the pickups that work well in it are not necessarily the ones that work well in Les Pauls. After having changed out dozens and dozens of different pickups in each one, I've kind of come to a conclusion about what I like, at least, in each version of the Gibson guitar. In the Les Paul, I really like pickups that fill in the mid-range without adding too much bass, where the trebles are a little more rounded. The Seth Lover pickup is a really good example of that. It's got a nice chewy mid-range, but it doesn't have overpowering bass. And the highs are rounded and a little bit softer. So that works well in the Les Paul. In the SG, if you install the same pickup, it might be a little bit of overkill in the mids, and the bass end might be a little mushy, a little too soft. So pickups like the Seymour Duncan 59 work really well in SG guitars because it has a nice firm and present bass and brighter trebles, and it's a little bit mid-scoop, but the SG itself tends to fill in a little bit of that missing mids in the pickup and makes for a more balanced sound. If you try to put the same pickup, the 59, in the Les Paul, you might find that you had too much bass, and the highs can become a little bit too trebly, too ice-picky, a little too present, and you're really going to be lacking some mids if you do that. So it's not quite as good a combination. They don't complement each other as well. In my personal Les Paul, I've got a whole lot of humbuckers installed. They've got a nice tight bass, but not too much bass, and some fairly full mids and a little bit of a rounded and yet but biting highs. So they work really, really well in the Les Paul guitar. In my SG, I've got the Seymour Duncan 59s. I think it sounds great. Even the neck pickup of the 59 sounds great in an SG because of the added mid content and a little bit of roll off on the bass end when it comes to the SG's natural tone. Whereas the 59 neck in the Les Paul sounds really woofy and boomy to me. Same thing goes for some of the higher power pickups. If I had a custom, which is Seymour Duncan's, it's sort of a higher powered version of the Seth Lover, with Alnico 2 magnet, and I think it sounds better in the Les Paul guitar because, again, it's got a lot of mids, it's lacking a little bit of bass, and the Les Paul tends to fill that in for it. The Custom 5 with its Alnico 5 magnet has a huge tight bass end and really screaming high end, but it lacks a lot of mids, and so I'd prefer that with the SG guitar, because the SG would tend to fill in those mids, and the really powerful bass of the Custom 5 wouldn't stand out quite as bad and be too much of a good thing in the SG guitar. So those are my thoughts on it. Tell me what you think. Let us know in the comment section if you agree or disagree. Be interested to hear your experiences with the same two guitars and pickup swaps. See you later.